Good quality furniture-grade hinges aren't cheap. Normally, when you consider the cost of the materials and the labor you have on a project, spending 10 or 20 bucks a hinge isn't that bad of an investment. But what if you need 40 or 50 hinges? In that case, you may be tempted to go to the hardware store and get some of those cheap, shiny metal ones. Today, I'll show you how to make those cheap hinges look and perform much better. We'll start with the tune-up, and then I'll show you 3 different methods of turning that shiny hardware store zinc finish into a nice aged patina. First, we have to deal with the biggest problem that comes with cheap hinges. The barrels are often too loose. This can vary from hinge to hinge. For example, I found that the larger 2.5-inch hinges are stiffer than the 2-inch hinges. At least that's the case with the ones I bought at Home Depot. Maybe it's because the larger hinge has 2 pins while the smaller hinge only has 1. I don't know. But you can see they both have some slop, and the smaller one is the worst. If a hinge is too loose, it'll be impossible to properly align a cabinet door. We have to tighten these up. So pull the pin with a pair of pliers and get yourself a small hammer and a hard surface to pound on. The goal is to attach each segment of the barrel to further close its gap. Start with relatively light taps and work your way down the edges of both leaves of the hinge. Then reassemble the hinge and test it. If it's still too loose, pull the pin back out and tap some more. It won't be long before you get a feel for how much tapping is required to sufficiently tighten the hinge. I like it to be a little difficult to fold with my fingers because the door will act as a lever and that'll make a stiff hinge feel much more loose. You can see the difference between a hinge I've adjusted and one that's fresh from the package. Now let's deal with that ugly zinc finish. There are several ways to remove the shine and even add a little rust or patina if you like. Many involve caustic chemicals and acids, but I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it quickly and naturally, and then a third way that is a chemical process, but it is super fast. First, we should degrease the hardware. I wash them in denatured alcohol, but soap and water will work just fine. Don't forget the screws. The first natural solution is to use citric acid, which you can buy in any grocery store or order online, and add that to water. Citric acid's in candy and drink mixes and other recipes. It's perfectly safe to handle. I just dump a couple tablespoons in a cup, add some water to cover the hardware, then a couple more tablespoons just to be sure. I'll mix it a time or 2 during the first couple minutes that it's soaking, just to make sure that powder dissolves. Then I let it sit. While that soaks, I'll show you another recipe. This is simple table salt and white vinegar. Again, a few tablespoons of salt and enough vinegar to cover the hardware is all that's required. We'll check on both in a little while. In the meantime, I have a third method that will get you instant results, but it does involve a little bit stronger chemical. This is gun blue. It's sold anywhere they sell gun supplies or online. I'll link to it below this video. It's a little caustic, so I wear gloves while I work with it. I see some folks online say to just dip the hardware right in the bottle. I think that's a bad idea. As you'll see, once the chemical is exposed to metal, it starts to become less effective. So I just separate only what I plan to use into another container. It's not going to take much for a pair of hinges and all the screws. I liberally apply it with an acid brush. I don't worry about getting it perfectly even. I want it to look more natural. I just make sure I cover everything and don't leave any bright spots behind. Notice here how I still have a wet brush, but when I try to spread it on the other side of the hinge, it doesn't work as well. That's what I mean about it losing its potency when it touches metal. The brush may still be wet, but the chemical in it is exhausted and I need another dip. So now you see why I don't like to dip the metal or even my brush directly in the bottle itself. It won't instantly spoil the whole bottle, but it may cause it to go bad prematurely. I see no need to completely cover the screws. I just do around the heads. I make sure though that the chemical gets all the way into the grooves. Of course, if I wanted a more vintage look, I'd find some slot-headed screws, but these will do fine. When everything is coated, rinse it off with water. You can add a second coat if you want them darker or more even, but I like this mottled appearance that I get from a single coat. Now let's check on the other 2 solutions. I left the hinges in for an hour or so. Both have lost their shiny zinc luster and have a matte appearance. The hinge soaked in citric acid and water seems to be a little duller than the hinge from the vinegar and salt solution, but both appear ready for some further aging. Now I'm putting some salt in a cup, adding both hinges and covering them with hydrogen peroxide. Mix it up a bit and you'll see it start to work relatively quickly as the surface will become all agitated and start bubbling and swirling. After 5 minutes, you can see some rust taking hold on the hinge that was treated with the citric acid. Clearly, that solution removed more of the zinc coating and left more bare metal than the vinegar and salt solution did. But after about an hour, both hinges have a fair amount of surface rust. I'm not really interested in hinges that look like they've been sitting in the bottom of an old coffee can in water for years, so I want to refine it a little bit, and I can do that with some light machine oil and a wire brush. How much you brush will obviously determine how much of the surface rust is left behind. I want more of a stained and corroded look than a rusty brown appearance. If brown and rusty is what you want, then you may just spray on a clear finish to preserve it so it won't rub off on your fingers. Just to see what would happen, I also soaked in salt and peroxide one of the hinges I had treated with the gun bluing agent. After just 15 minutes, it was well coated in rust. So let's review our results. If you want a matte finish without a bunch of aging, the citric acid and water solution is a little bit faster than the vinegar and salt solution, but both will do the trick. If you want a very dark mottled appearance, then the gun blue is a very fast and effective way to get there. If you want a rusted look, a soak in salt and peroxide will get you there. How long it takes depends on which solution you use to soak beforehand to remove the zinc. The gun-blued hinge rusted very quickly. The hinges that were pre-soaked in the citric acid solution or in the vinegar solution required an hour or so in the peroxide and salt to start to rust. If you like the rusty look, spray on a clear coat to preserve it. I think this will look great on a very rustic project. If you want something more stained and less rusty, use a wire brush and some light oil to even things out. All of these processes may be used with any zinc hardware: hinges, brackets, pulls, nuts and bolts, anything you want looking less shiny and modern. See you next time. This is the CRB7 router jig system from Empower Tools, and it does just about everything with amazing accuracy due to its clever micro adjuster. It's just one of the many product innovations from this small family-owned company. You gotta check them out at the link in the notes below this video. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.